What is up, Amazon sellers, and happy Sunday. Welcome back to the weekly Amazon Q&A show where we share some news, some stats, the occasional business maxim, and of course, we are here to answer your questions about selling on Amazon. So if you are curious about retail arbitrage, perhaps you have a issue with online arbitrage, maybe you're diving into wholesale, or you've just got a Keepa quandary, well, drop that in the chat and we'll be happy to help. For those of you who are new here, my name is Chris Grant, and to my right is my vitrescible co-host, Chris Rasick. Chris, how's Sunday treating you, man?
Sunday is going all right. Fought through, like, one is where you had to really fight through distractions, but like you get everything out on time and you're where you need to be and you did what you need to do. And so it's a bit satisfying there. It's good to see you, man. Hey, so I know little time for me to talk about the stupid things and silly things that happen to me while we wait for some people to get in. I've got a good one today, Chris. I'm still laughing about it a few days afterwards, right? So, and it's probably too much background, but I feel like it's necessary. So I am fully aware that I am an old man, right? And I can recognize those get off my lawn moments, an old man yells at cloud, and I can recognize those and I laugh about them, right? But they occur. They are there. So so basically, over a long period of time, I get a lot of newsletters, right? And it aggregates news. And so I see a bunch of different news. And I had seen multiple times through like music award shows and stuff like that, the name Chapel Roan, right? Mm-hmm. And she's very popular. She's well respected, and she's kind of climbing the clout ladder of pop music, so I was reading about that separately, or I was reading about that, but I know I'm not going to listen to it. I know I'm old. I know it's not for me, so I'm not going to look her up and actually listen to her music because I know there's a really good chance I won't like it. But I was like, well, there must be something to it. So then separately, I have two daughters, and they come around pop music stuff. And so separately, there was this song that I heard the name, and then you kind of put two and two together. You kind of hear it in a commercial or an outro to a show or something like that, or you overhear it on one of their tablets, and somebody tells a story about it. And it was called Pink Pony Club. And my daughter said something about Pink Pony Club, and she likes to just say things like she thinks I'm going to know what they are. And I said, I said, honey, I don't know what that is. She goes, oh, it's a song, and she sings it. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's like little kid music, and my wife corrected me. Apparently the subject matter is anything but little kid music, but it's True. basic. It's basic, just pop music. It's for simple people, right? There's very little artistic integrity to it. Kind of like country music without flannels and pickup trucks. There's just not a lot there as far as substance. And so eventually there comes the point of convergence where it dawns on me that Pink Pony Club is a song by Chapel Roan, right? And my mind is blown. And of course, and I have all of the old man stuff like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, that's, and I'm like, this is what I've been reading about. I was like, oh my, so, and it's just a funny moment. And I was sharing it with my youngest daughter and my wife. And I said, oh my God. So I'm kind of recounting that story. And I said, I didn't realize that stupid song was Chapel Roan. And, and I said, it's just a stupid little kid song. And that's when my wife was like, actually, and I was like, I don't care. I don't care lyrically. I don't care what it is. So anyway, so I was like, it's basically the equivalent of, and my wife says, like that Meghan Trainor song, right? All about that bass. I said, yeah, it's like stupid song like that. Or that other stupid one about the monkey. And I can't think of the name, right? And they both look at me like, monkey. I said, yeah, it's something about like a monkey dance or it's got a monkey in it. And they both just look at me like I am the dumbest person on earth, right? And they're so miffed and so just completely blank out on it. They got to call my older daughter down from upstairs. Meanwhile, I know that Perplexity, there's a good chance if I have the words correct, that Perplexity might be able to figure out which one I'm talking about. So while my daughter's coming down, while my oldest is coming down, I'm typing. I said, "What's that song about the monkey dance, that pop song?" And as my daughter's coming down, Perplexity is spitting out the answer. And yeah, Big T's got it. The song's literally called Dance Monkey. They were stumped. I gave them both of the words in the wrong order, 2 words in the wrong order. They were completely stumped. I said, and I was like, "Are you serious?" Like, I said monkey dance, and neither one of you. And so, I mean, it was very funny, but I was just like, I said, "You got to be kidding me." I said, "What's that thing I take the dogs out? Something like a door front." And they're like, "Oh, shut up." And so it was, but I was so, I laughed so hard that they could not figure out, like, who knew that a 2-word riddle just switched around could actually stump 2 people in the same room.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but they do listen to pop music. So, I mean, the depth of how that music affects you, I'm not sure is incredibly
Yes.
lasting.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, we're only a couple years removed from them blaring it on the speakers in the house and dancing along to it and singing along to it. And it just, it escaped them completely that quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I get a little bit of pushback about what I like to play in the car. I'm playing a bunch of 90s music, and whether it's a bit of, and I'm all over the place. I mean, I will listen to everything from grunge to both East Coast and West Coast rap from the 90s, and they're just like, when was this made? And I'm like, music had a lot of good music, up until now. And then, of course, you're old and you were born in the 1900s.
See, the funny thing is that it's actually my 7-year-old that is taking to my music more than I realized. Like,
Interesting.
she's literally singing. She was singing like Steely Dan and Supertramp. And
Nice.
I have this giant mix of like 600 songs, and I just put it on shuffle, and that's pretty much what I listen to in the car when it's not audiobooks. And I swear, like, she's only heard it like 3-4 times. They always yell at me like, "No, it's played like 100, Dad." I was like, "Whatever." But they're like singing. She's singing along to it, and I was like, "All right." So maybe
Yeah.
she's an old soul.
Steely
Before I
Dan
know
is
where,
solid.
yeah, steal it. Yeah, they don't get enough credit. But just to put a button on it, I did see an interesting thing. I think it was the guy from the 1975, which I don't know that band very well, but I know he's got a massive, massive ego, a very high opinion of himself. But he actually made an excellent point. He said that when you look at music, if you took music in the 90s and the 2000s, I think you would agree the last time it was actually good, and you played it, you went into it, you took a time machine back and you played it for someone 40 or so years before that, it would sound completely foreign to them. They'd be like, this is, I don't know what this is. This is just noise and stuff like that. And, like, similar to my reaction to modern music. However, he countered that with a point that said, if you took the popular music from the 2020s and even the 2010s, think about like the Adeles. I don't even know. I can't even give you a list past that. But if you took an Adele song and played it for someone in the 80s, it would be very familiar to them. It would be, they would think it was just an interpolation of stuff that already exists. So he was actually making a point that we're not making strides in originality. We're not pushing the boundaries nearly as much as we were decades ago. He thinks
Interesting.
modern music is much more derivative, and blatantly so.
He may not be wrong. I mean, there's literally a science to it now. You know, they've got it so, you know, the beat drops at the right time, and they've got it so that, you know, the hooks are just right, and to get people to listen.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
he
and
may not be
yeah, there's
wrong.
actually like, yeah, they can actually like tap into things in our brain that they can actually scientifically engineer things to be more catchy now,
Yeah.
so maybe that's where the innovation is, instead of songwriting and actually mixing up new melodies and pushing the boundaries that way. Maybe we've adopted more of a marketing and science angle to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's
it was a really interesting point.
just sugar rush of music, essentially, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into a little bit of news. I could go down this rabbit hole with you, because I took Wyatt to see an anime movie this past week, and it made me feel rather old as well. But we should digress. We've got a couple of pieces of news. The first one, this always it's my favorite time of the month, essentially, because retail sales numbers are out, and retail sales in August were up 6.8, or we're up 6.8% year over year. So back to school season gave retailers a nice little bump. Of course, like we have seen over and over and over again, all of these articles like to throw in the caveat, but fears of tariffs are still kicking in, which I don't know when that trope is going to get tired. But the core retail sales numbers, this excludes autos, gas, and restaurants, was up 0.26% month over month. Now, that is versus a 1.55% bump in July. So it is down significantly from July. However, we have to remember that in July, we had the Amazon Prime Day bump, which was a massive bump, not just for Amazon, but for all retailers. Core retail sales are still up 6.67% year over year. Total retail sales, this excludes automobiles, it excludes gas, but it includes restaurants. Those were up 0.5% month over month. And that was 1.45% in July. But we are up a total of 6.81% year over year. The National Retail Federation president, Matthew Shea, credits this to lower fuel costs, which I took my wife out yesterday, and not in my area, but in another area of Orlando, I saw fuel prices at $2.75. I was taken aback. In my area, it's right around $2.95. I'm not sure why the 20% or 20-cent difference, but that is down from like 320 or 325 just a couple of weeks ago. So, I mean, that is solid. But he credited those lower fuel costs. He credited tax-free holidays, and he said people are still pulling shopping forward, which, like, I don't know, like, how many months can we say people are pulling their shopping forward, before it's like that's not the case anymore. Let's talk about the category winners and losers. The big winner is actually digital products. Digital products had 1.58% month over month bump, and digital products are up 25.9% year over year. Now, what are digital products? We're talking audiobooks. We are talking, music, basically anything that you can buy digitally. Big bump in that kind of stuff. Grocery and beverage was up 0.98% month over month, and grocery and beverage is up 7% year over year. Clothing and accessories was fairly flat at 0.2% month over month, but it's up 8.2% year over year. And general merchandise was up 0.39% month over month, and up 7.63% year over year. So some solid growth in places that we all sell: grocery, clothing and accessories, general merchandise. Sporting goods, hobby, music, and books was down just a touch at 0.8%, but it's still up almost 9% year over year. Electronics and appliances is down 0.2% month over month, but still up 3.5% year over year. Health and personal care, basically flat, both month over month and year over year. Home furniture and home furnishings was up 0.23% month over month, and still up 3% year over year. Building and garden supplies is where the worst hit has taken place. It's down 2% month over month and down 7.7% year over year. Now, why does this even matter? Well, core sales strength shows that school shopping is still one of the most reliable seasonal anchors, and it did solid. Month over month growth is slowing down compared to July, but again, the Amazon effect was very big in July. And back to school shopping it just starts earlier and earlier every year. I mean, our back to school shopping was in July out of necessity due to the fact that back to school started in August for us. Now, what does this actually mean for sellers? Well, there is a lot of category opportunity. Clothing, general merchandise, and grocery are all showing strong year over year growth. And those might be places you just want to keep an eye out for more arbitrage opportunities. Of course, maybe you want to be a little bit cautious in the building and gardening section, maybe in the big ticket discretionary categories. Those seem to be cooling a little bit. But we continue to see that the consumer is just strong and just keeps going.
Yeah, there's it's interesting. What did you? Let me scroll back. What did you say? Matthew Shea. I assume the NRF is the National Retail
Federation.
He credited lower fuel costs, but yet two of the top four winners, digital products, which zero gas.
Right.
You buy those from your couch, and I would argue that grocery and beverage already has fuel costs baked into it. Like you're going to spend that no matter what's going on. So I kind of disagree with him there. And he also said tax-free holidays. That's been a thing every year. So I would imagine that's baked in as well. So I don't think you can actually credit any increases or any changes, to those. But NRF, he's a president of the NRF, so he needs talking points. So I get it.
Yeah.
It's what's interesting is, like you made that point about pulling stuff forward, and it's like, okay, how much are you going to continue? Eventually that implies that there's going to be a month that the bottom falls out. That there has to be a month that we've pulled this from, and it has to be realized at some point to be true, which the more this goes on, the more we keep hearing this over and over again, simply along with fears of tariffs, the less credibility it gets. This is, sometimes growth is just growth. It is, and on the fuel thing, you could argue, electronics and appliances, those would cost some gas, but those were down. So it's actually kind of like the inverse of what he's talking about. Speaking of fear of tariffs, I saw for the first time a website, and I think it was one of those music sites or maybe bicycling sites from the UK somewhere. Like Gears for Music and like Lord Guns over there and stuff like that. Stuff that pops up on my computer on a semi-regular basis. So one of those sites for the very first time said, "We do not ship to the US." Yeah.
Interesting.
No option whatsoever. Yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, I mean, this is I don't know how you don't look at this as positive, because and honestly, building and gardening supplies, as strange as it is, I happen to fall into, I usually go into the patio category, and I'll pull the top ASINs. and I'll actually run those through TA, and I'll actually do some sourcing in the patio, because there's a lot of really good seasonal sales right now. So even though it's not the prime buying season for that stuff, I've often found that the discounts outpace the slowing of the velocity, and it can still be very, very profitable. I've made a lot of money on weed eater line, and trimming line. There's a lot of money there, especially this part of the year. But I was surprised at the velocity. I was looking at stuff that was, patio isn't that big. And I was looking at stuff ranked over 100,000, and the velocity was surprisingly still pretty good.
And doesn't necessarily fall off that much. I mean, it's got to be what? It's got to be 30 to 40% of the country needs to mow their lawn all year long. And
Right.
You're talking most, if not all, of California, Texas, Arizona, Alabama, Florida. I mean, my guy, he goes to every other week, but he still mows, 12 months out of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I would guess that any drop in, building and gardening supplies is probably just fall off from the overspending that people did with travel and stuff, which is still, I still think some of it's kind of post lockdown. I think I think people are still kind of, instead of taking another trip because maybe you overextended yourself, you decide to redo a flower bed or something, or, maybe buy some special yard stuff, and that kind of becomes a surrogate for the travel that you'd like to do, but you spend a little bit too much. So
absolutely. And I know we got pushback on this when we brought it up last time, but I think that if we see a rate reduction in September, which that's got to be happening here pretty soon, when I said it last time, they were like, "Oh, that's never going to happen," and now I'm seeing more and more people baking it in to their predictions. So it's going to be very curious how this plays out for the rest of the year. And speaking of the rest of the year, the next piece of news I've got is the holiday 2025 forecast, because both Deloitte and Bain dropped their annual retail forecast for Q4. And both of them pretty much said the same thing with some different numbers. They say that holiday sales are going to grow, but they do both think they're going to be at a slower pace, like the slowest pace since the pandemic. And you could see this as a warning sign, or I think you could see it as an opportunity. So here are the numbers. Deloitte says that their total holiday sales, which they count that as November 2025 to January of 2026, which they are correct. Bain is incorrect because Bain goes from November to December. But Deloitte expects growth of 2.9 to 3.4%. Hitting 1.61 trillion to 1.62 trillion in total sales between November and January. Now, by comparison, last year grew 4.2% to 1.57 trillion. And that would be the slowest growth rate since COVID happened. But there's a bit of a bright spot here. E-commerce, they expect to grow 7 to 9% year over year, totaling 305 to 310.7 billion. Last year was right in the middle at 8% for 285 billion in e-commerce sales. Deloitte says online sales are going to remain critical as they believe consumers will be stretching their budgets a little bit. But another piece that Deloitte said is disposable personal income. They expect to go up between 3.1% and 5.4%, which has also historically been a strong predictor of retail spending. And they said, but perhaps there could be some elevated inflation. Although, if you look at, see, this is the problem with inflation. Like, this is the problem with statistics. There's statistics, there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. But if you look at one set of inflation numbers, like, it's not good. You'll look at trueflation in numbers, and trueflation says that inflation is actually pretty flat. And so I try to look at all of these numbers and try to piece things together, and hopefully we're somewhere in the middle. But they say some elevated inflation could mean that these dollars get absorbed a little bit by higher prices. Bain, which their numbers are going to be a little bit different because they go from November to December, they project growth to be 4% year over year to 975 billion November to December of 2025. That is lower than the 10-year average of 5.2% growth. In-store sales, they expect growth to be 2.75% year over year, and they expect the strongest growth in clothing, general merchandise, and health and personal care, all forecasted to grow 5% or more. E-commerce or non-store sales, they expect to grow 7% year over year. Over the past 2 years, this is also another way that you can massage numbers. In one set of numbers, they use the 10-year average. In this set of numbers, they are using the past 2-year average of 9 to 10% growth in e-commerce compared to 7% growth this year. They did not share the 10-year growth. E-commerce is expected to account for 50%, 50, of total holiday spending growth. That's a big deal. Now, they do believe there are going to be some headwinds. Credit delinquencies are up a little bit, only 3% year over year, but that is the highest since 2011. It's especially pronounced in under 30 shoppers. They do say that the saving rates are a bit lower than normal, and the labor force participation is down 0.4 points year over year. Tailwinds, on the other hand, wages are up 3.7% year over year, which is outpacing CPI, up 3.1%. S&P 500 is up 21% year over year, and there could be some rate cuts coming. That's specifically something from Bain, not from me. Now, what does this mean for us as sellers? Well, e-commerce is going to take 50% of consumer spending for the holidays. That is massive. So even with growth slowing, online sales are projected to hit, somewhere around 300 billion this holiday shopping season. And of course, like 10% or 10% more people expect to participate in Black Friday this year than last year. So here's the thing. Both Deloitte and Bain are pretty clear. They don't think this is going to be the blockbuster holiday season that we're used to, although we're going to continue to see growth. So this is going to be bigger than last year, which was the biggest Q4 ever. E-commerce, of course, remains to be a massive growth driver. And there are going to be a lot of deals out there, especially for those people doing retail arbitrage. Like, I don't know. I continue to be bullish still. Like, I haven't seen anything quite yet that is making me worry too much.
No, if anything, I think it's encouraging. I think all of us being in e-commerce, I mean, this is such a great place to be right now because our growth is almost impenetrable regardless of what you want to look at, right? Because even if there are fears of tariffs, all the stuff, all these numbers that we went through, they'll lay out mitigating factors, and kind of like in order to temper expectations. But within that subset of numbers, e-commerce continues to just chew up more and more territory. So it almost doesn't matter what inflation does. It doesn't matter what they do with rates. It doesn't, I mean, the credit delinquencies or whatnot, you even see, the savings rates are going to slow. That's how the average consumer counteracts inflation. They stop saving as much. They don't think to stop spending. I mean, we see that in household credit card data, and I'm not necessarily making that up. But we are insulated from the vast majority of outcomes, positive and negative, which, and obviously the positive outcomes are probably going to boost our growth even more within the subset of numbers. So, I mean, this is encouraging, and it's, and that's kind of how I read this kind of news, and that's how when I listen to you, giving these numbers out, I just know that we're tucked inside, we're in neatly, safely in a cocoon of positive growth, so.
Something I'm also curious about, like, one of the reasons I'm so curious and interested in this Q4 is, we had that news come out about toys, which I don't think it was as bad as, everyone was expecting. But how many people are not going to sell in the toy category because of that? And I saw Steve French post something. He's like, if my DMs are a cross section of the Amazon seller community, the number of people who plan on quitting after this Q4 is kind of insane. And I'm just curious, like, how many people are going to sit this Q4 out because it's just too much for them, which I get. Like, this is not something, this is not a, do I still think it can be a side business? Yes. I don't like to call it a side hustle. That's what selling on eBay is. That's a side hustle that you can just kind of, you can do sometimes. And if you let it go, it's not really a big deal. This is something you really need to keep your finger on the pulse of. And you need to treat it like a real business. And how many people just don't want to do that? And how much is there going to be for those of us who do to mop up and take all that straight to the bank?
Yeah, I still think this is a great business. It's more than a side business. It's definitely more than a side hustle. I am still 100% convinced that this is a completely viable business, and I think people read too many headlines, and they don't read the actual articles, and they just spout it off, right? There were people. There was a comment in the FBA Today group that I could not let slide, because I thought it was disrespectful to you, number one. So I wanted to make sure that I was on record as in protest, right? And it's the tired, just overused statement that the only people making money in this business are the people selling courses. And that is the most unoriginal, thoughtless, and to put it in FBA Today, when this person knows that you run that group, you're I don't know, co-founder, you and Nate, it's disrespectful to you. That's what prompted my response. But it also is it's just dumb. I mean, those are the people that need to quit. Okay. Because that's, there's another saying that I tried to be respectful, and I tried to, I always, if I'm going to say F you to someone, I like to try to do it politely, but there's a saying that I edited out, and the saying goes, the only ones saying the game is rigged are the players that don't know how to play. Okay. And we know that, and I'm not calling anybody out except maybe this person. But there are a whole lot of people that got into this business because they were told that it was a turnkey moneymaker. and they were sold bad information. This is a business. It should have been presented as a business opportunity. And by stating it as a business opportunity, that implies, and you're supposed to understand, that businesses require work.
Mm-hmm.
And we ran into this a whole lot of time. You can rewind all the way back to people saying this was passive income. The people you need to be listening to, and the people who are still bullish on this opportunity and still making money in this industry, are the ones that said, no, it's not passive. It's, at the easiest, it's residual. You have a whole bunch of work, and I got to hat tip to Nate McAllister. He was the first one to actually call it that, and I think that's the proper way to describe it. You front load all of the work. You buy the inventory, you pack it up, you ship it in, and then for the most part, once it's actually in the fulfillment centers, there's some admin stuff, but most of the work is front loaded. And then on a residual basis, you make money. So you're not actually working when the money comes in, which is, the misconception that it's passive. When in actuality, I think residual is the correct word for that. But all of that to say, there is work involved, and things were very, very easy. And, when we talk about the ungating situation, there were people, when you got into the business and how you were presented with the opportunity is going to dictate how you feel about this gating process. Mm-hmm. And there are people, if you got in around the pandemic, around lockdowns, you think that this is unprecedented difficulties as far as getting ungated. If you were around a little bit longer than that, or maybe a little bit after even, that it's just a cycle, that they're going to tighten up, they're going to loosen up. And it's just this rubber band effect, and they never quite get it right, but that's kind of arbitrage in and of itself. That means that when it gets easy, that's when you jump on the opportunity and you get ungated in the stuff, and you start pumping in inventory, and you start making money in those brands. Mm-hmm. Because there are a whole lot of people that were like, I tried 4 different times and they didn't approve me, so I give up. The people who persevere beyond that, or just wait for the cycle, wait till this Q4 is over, and then start going after these brands, they're going to find it's a much easier time. They're going to make much more money, right? So perseverance is hardly ever the wrong answer,
Absolutely.
But there are people who are not good business people that are actively selling. Selling on Amazon got a little bit, probably too much press. It was a little bit too easy, and if you sold a 2-pack of wheat thins that were $2.42 each at Walmart, if you remember selling those for $25 in 2020, if you're really being honest with yourself, that was too easy. That's money that, you're not going to make on a long-term basis, but that's the nature of the business. You cash out in the opportunities that you can, you take your hits, you liquidate at a, small loss, or you liquidate a break even, and you go for a new buy. That's just the nature of business. We solve problems, and every business has problems. And I think some people just aren't cut out for business in general.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. And guys, we want to take your questions as well. So if you got questions, make sure to drop them in the chat. We're going to get to those very, very soon. Before we get to, we've got a business law for you guys. I want to invite you to join OAC Plus. If you're looking for more stuff like what Chris and I do here, just this morning, I put in all of the content for the rest of the month that's going to be going up, and it's 14 pieces of content. There's sourcing with Chris, there's weekly coaching, and all kinds of stuff. But we've got 14 lives that are going to happen between now and about October the 7th or so is how far I got in the group. And that's on top of being able to ask questions all the time in the chat, getting some incredibly in-depth answers, not only from us, but from other people in the group. We've got some incredibly smart people in the group. That is something that has been really good. But on top of that, okay, on top of just those things, you get leads 24/7 via Flip Alert. We've got a channel with Amazon to Amazon Flip Leads. You get free access to Storefront Stalker Pro. We've got a catalog of courses that you can take to learn wholesale, to learn how to stack credit cards, to learn online arbitrage, you name it, it's in there. And also suspension support. Like if you get suspended, we take care of you. I mean, the list of things that you get to join the OAC Plus community is too long to really go over. So if you're interested, I would suggest you hop in. If you want to go to oachallenge.com/plus, learn a little bit more, or even shoot me an email, ask questions about it. We'd love to have you because we are looking for a few more good people to join the ranks. Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, and I usually try to pile on with benefits, and it's just at this point it's just too much to talk about. But I would like real life. There are people out there that are spending 5 figures, to try to learn this business. And there are, kids with Lambos and there's different, and I don't know if it's worth it or not, whatever, you make your own judgments. I'm pretty sure at this point, if you've listened to us before, you know how we feel about that. There's a different vibe in this, and I think it's kind of, I think it matches this show, like if you're a regular viewer of this show, we don't pump a lot of stuff up. We don't buy into negativity. We look at things objectively. We try to reason through things. And then we do our best to try to figure out the path through it, good or bad, and I just spent yesterday, I spent an hour and a half with a member of OAC Plus, and we were setting up. You get free access to Storefront Stalker Pro, which I am a huge fan of. I'm going to insist that I start being called an ambassador probably very soon. Just even an honorary, anointment of that title, I think is fair. But it makes me so much money every single month, and every single member as part of OAC Plus gets access to the basic plan, I think it's called. And you get 3 stores. You get a massive discount if you like it and you want more stores to stock. But we sat for 90 minutes on a one-to-one call. I set up a Zoom call, and we went over and we found, we went over anything, all the questions that this person had. And then I actually found some stores and some ideas to find more stores. And on this 90-minute call for free, that I just did it because somebody needed help. And that's kind of what we do in the OAC Plus. And she has a store now that is clearly an arbitrage seller, has a very nice, I was kind of jealous of it when I found it for her. They've got a real nice mix of a whole bunch of good categories, and not just, beauty, but there was like tools and industrial, and it was a real nice mix of arbitrage opportunities and categories. And that's in her dashboard for free. And she knows exactly how she can pull up in a matter of 10 minutes. We walk through no less than 2 or 3 dozen storefronts. And then those storefronts, each one of those storefronts is going to give 10 to 15 other opportunities. So she now has everything she needs to fine-tune Storefront Stalker Pro. And that is just such a small perk of what's included with OAC Plus. And then the other thing I want to mention is, there's one phrase that, and we've only been at it not even like 2 months, right?
Yep.
There's one phrase that I think is also a testament to the community that you've built is you see the phrase, "Oh, I've always heard this," but they put that phrase, and the scenario is usually something they thought was the case, but it's been answered with actual experience from sellers doing it a different way, right? So you kind of took anecdotal policies, things, the way you thought things were just because you heard it was that way. But then there's somebody in the group who's like, actually, I did this, and they'll show you real experience, and you can fine tune how you think things are, and you get a much more realistic. I just felt like it's a very mature, it's a very productive conversation in the general chat the vast majority of the time when I'm not cracking stupid jokes. If I take that out of the equation, and it's a very good education on top of everything else.
Right. Michael, yeah, if you got a question, drop it below. We'll get to it here in just a moment. But after those kind words that Chris said, if you're interested, head over to oacchallenge.com/plus. We'd love to get you in the group. All right. We've got a business law for you this week, and then we will get to all of your questions. But I heard someone mention this, and I was like, you know what? We got to talk about this. So we're going to talk about the law of large numbers for just a moment. The law of large numbers is this kind of fundamental principle in probability and statistics that says, as you perform more and more independent trials of a random experiment, say like flipping a coin or rolling a dice, the average result from those trials will get closer and closer to the experiment's true expected value. All right. So in simple terms, like this is why casinos always win in the long run. All right. Short-term luck runs out over thousands of bets, which pull the results toward the house. Okay. For example, you flip a coin, it has a 50% chance of heads. Well, if you flip it once and you get tails and you win, okay. But if you flip it 1,000 times, well, you're going to land really close to 500 heads and 500 tails. Well, this law works on Amazon as well. Okay. And the way that it works in my mind is something that we've talked about quite frequently, going wide and shallow. Okay. That works. All right. It also works in sourcing. You don't necessarily need to put in 10,000 hours, but you need to put in 10,000 iterations. Okay. And by using this law of large numbers, we can tilt the numbers in our favor as Amazon sellers, just like the casino tilts the numbers in their favor. Okay. For example, I've seen way too many people, especially lately, talk about, oh, I went real deep on this brand, I went real deep on this product, and now, hey, now I need to sell these products to you, the other social media person who maybe follows me because I got gated, because whatever happened, because some policy change. All right. So buying one product or looking at, too few deals, well, you're literally trying to use the inverse of the law of large numbers. You end up blowing your bankroll by going too narrow. Something happens, returns go up, policies change. We end up losing that bankroll. The law of large numbers, though, it lets you know that the more at bats that you take, the closer you're going to land at your real average. In other words, volume negates luck. Okay. If I may, I stole that from Alex Hormozy. Like him or don't like him, doesn't matter. That aphorism is solid. So the more trials you run, the more predictable your average becomes. Your results stop swinging wildly. Okay. Now on the macro, not necessarily the micro. And this is something I see way too many sellers maybe overanalyze their business a little bit sometimes. They're like, oh, well, I had I lost 50 cents on this one sale, and then they don't even say, oh, well, I made $1.50 on the other 32 sales. Okay. So that $500 profit on one SKU and $200 loss on the next SKU, well, it gets drowned out because you're running 100 different experiments across 100 different ASINs. And suddenly, when you look at the macro, well, your return on your investment stabilizes. This, again, goes for sourcing. It's pretty easy nowadays to analyze 50, 100, 500 deals from your couch while watching, football on Sunday. You can use tools like Keepa, SellerAmp, Flip Alert, Storefront Stalker Pro. And each one of these deals is going to have some level of risk. Okay. One may have a 70% chance of a $10 profit, a 20% chance of a break even, and maybe a 10% chance of taking a loss. You buy 5 different products. Well, maybe you end up breaking even in total. And those are the people who say, oh, well, it doesn't work. This is a scam. But you spread that bankroll out across 150 different products, and well, your results, your macro, you end up locking in around that, $5 profit per unit across that entire catalog, and the losers tend to fade into the background. So how do you use this law of large numbers in your business? Well, number one, consistency beats luck. Look at 50 to 500 products each sourcing session. I think I'm becoming more and more inclined to think that maybe we should stop thinking of sourcing sessions as, oh, I got to lock in for the next 90 minutes. Maybe it should be, I got to lock in and look at 90 different ASINs and, pick out the winners from those. Track everything. This is just a simple spreadsheet. Okay. Track in every lead if you can, because just because it's not profitable right now, if you found 1 or 2 different places to possibly source it, you might be able to source that again in the future, because sales typically come around over and over again. Definitely track the things that you're buying, because you're probably going to be able to buy those over again in the future when the price goes back up, when the sale comes back around. Track the expected value. Track your expected profit. Track the diversity of your sources. Okay, and use that law of large numbers to never run out of places. Like there's like at least 3 million e-commerce sites in the United States that are legitimate to source from. There's no one who should ever be able to say there's nowhere to source. All right. And then, of course, if you can, like, automate some of your sourcing, whether that's through a tool, whether that's through going back through old spreadsheets, or hooking your spreadsheets up to Keepa and having numbers being calculated for you in real time. But if you do all of these things and use the law of large numbers in your business, you should easily be able to succeed at this business over time. I shouldn't say easily. That's not the right term. It's simple. It's not necessarily easy.
Yeah. Successfully.
Yes.
Yeah. This is interesting. This is essentially this is UPS is there. This is simply this is a much smarter, more intelligent way of when we say you need to put your reps in, right? And I think, and this is an important part to draw a distinction between numbers and statistics, because numbers never lie, statistics will. So we'll separate those two concepts. But math is always math. Like if we all got the Men in Black kind of memory wipe, eventually we'd come back to all the same math answers, right? It's a lower percentage than new people think. It's not 100. It's also not 0. I mean, this is the same concept that we talk about when we talk about new sellers who are like, I searched for 45 minutes straight and I found nothing. Like that's like, you're not casting a wide enough net. You're not allowing for the numbers, for the true numbers to come out. Think about it in a test buy. We get a lot of questions about what should my test buy be. And it's a difficult question to answer, right? Because, you know, you have to consider your capital but you also have to consider what you're going to do with the results of that test buy. You know, if you buy 5 units as a test buy and one of them gets returned, your number is going to tell you that that product has a 20% return rate. Well, anything, you know, most things outside of maybe shoes, sometimes 20% isn't going to be the actual answer, you know, and you don't have a big enough sample size. You know, you need to realize what you're doing that test buy for, and you have to actually use the information that you gathered from that test buy. Ignore the return rate. Now, if you buy 5 more, or you decide to go 10 more because the other 4 were pretty profitable, and that one return didn't hurt you that bad enough that you give up on the experiment, then maybe, you know, you merge the two, and then you can kind of start getting an accurate return rate. You know, but in the meantime, you've assessed sales velocity. You know, you've assessed where the pricing is going to be when you do sell it. You know, and then you're evaluating what the long-term prospects are of that product. You know, and the same thing. That's a good point about, you know, talking about the amount of time that you're going to source versus the amount of products that you're going to source. Because if I can sit down and say, hey, I got 90 minutes to source, and I pull up a spreadsheet of leads or whatever it may be, there are plenty of times that I'm only going to get through maybe 2 or 3 individual leads over that 90-minute period, because maybe one of those leads has a site-wide sale, and I'm going to start going down rabbit trails, and I only got through 3 different products. However, I've got 15 to 20 ASINs and a massive order from one store because I was able to go page by page and pull multiple profitable products out of one single site. You know, so from the perspective of, well, I didn't get through very many products, you know, that scenario, that hypothetical, you can't say it wasn't a successful sourcing session, you know. So it was 90 minutes, you know, amount of products low, profit high. You know, I'm okay with that, and all of us should be, right? Yeah. So it's interesting how this plays out, and you know, it's you just kind of need to expand, and it comes down to patience too. You know, that's the one part that this law isn't going to talk about when we apply it to selling, is that, you know, especially new sellers, they're so eager to get those wins, you know, and you kind of try to shoehorn some stuff in that maybe isn't the best idea, you know, and that's based on impatience. So if you keep this law in mind, you know, hopefully that'll help kind of keep the expectations realistic, you know, and kind of realize that it's a longer game, you know, than your that urge for instant gratification is telling you it should be.
Exactly. Oh man, we should talk about delayed gratification sometime. There's like Charlie Munger has got so many good frames on that. Anyway, I want to talk about that. I also really kind of want to dive into George Mack's essay on being high agency, because I think we all have a lot to learn from that. He had this fantastic, he pulled a little piece out of it this week on Twitter, and talked about how do you tell which one of your friends have high agency, and talked about how your friends with high agency typically have an infinite number of frames. Anyway, if you haven't read it, just Google George Mack high agency. I think it's at highagency.com. Fantastic read. It's up there with Naval's Twitter thread on how to get rich.
Yep.
All right.
That's come up in a couple different interviews too.
Yeah. All right. Let's answer some of your guys' questions. We got an hour into this before getting to them. Jerry, any information on this new virtual multi-pack listings that have been added to our listings? I have not really gone down that rabbit trail, because from my understanding, and I did pull it up here, those are supposed to be on brand-owned ASINs. So, to help boost sales and delight customers, we're running a virtual multi-pack pilot focusing on FBA brand-owned ASINs with strong customer demand for multi-unit purchases. So, I would imagine that for those of us doing arbitrage, we're probably a bit of an afterthought. Do we perhaps get some multi-unit sales from this virtual multi-packs that they're creating? I would imagine, but I'm not necessarily sure that it's something that we're going to go and be able to leverage to create multi-packs that are on items that you currently sell. Let's see here. Oh, Jerry, $4.90 a gallon in Seattle. That is rough.
God, you almost take for granted that there could be that big of a swing across the country.
EB, is the Q4 group going to offer toy leads? Yep. Yeah. I don't think that it's necessary not to sell toys in Q4. Is the way that you should maybe buy toys in Q4 going to be different? I think so. I think you're going to need to check to see, I think you're going to need to add it to your inventory without any actual in stock and see if you get a notification that you need to provide testing documentation. And then you're also going to need to be like, oh, well, maybe I don't buy 250 units. I don't necessarily like leaving money on the table, but I do like playing an infinite game, which means that sometimes we need to de-risk ourselves, and leaving money on the table with products sometimes de-risks our business. And we'll dive more into that as we get closer to Q4, although it's right around the corner.
Well, and there is still a degree of fleshing this out that needs to be done too. I would argue that we, at this point right now, talking about toys in Q4, we don't know what money's on the table or not. There may be money that just isn't even on the table. Because we're not sure. We have inklings, and we have leanings one way and the other. I'd imagine the popular stuff is probably going to have the documentation filed with Amazon pretty quickly, and so that would mean that a large chunk of the money the revenue that's going to be generated from toys in Q4 is still going to be available, and largely using the same methods that we've used in previous Q4s. So, but we don't know what it's going to look like in practice quite yet.
Yeah. See, that's the biggest question that I have is how many listings does this actually affect? Because Amazon did come out and say, we're going to leverage our relationships with these testing centers, which to me kind of sounds like, hey, we're going to be sending you all of our private label sellers business. So why don't you feed us the information, on all the Hasbro, Mattel, and all those other things that you guys already have the testing documentation for. Yeah, it'll be really, really interesting to see how that plays out.
And their strategic relationships and whatnot, and certain ones are going to be cleared sooner than others, absolutely. And but also remember the bundle policy. We also know that, and this isn't unique to Amazon. The same thing happened when I was in the banking industry, when they would roll out regulations, the government and whatnot. You kind of have to release this stuff on a wide scale, but the issues are usually a much slimmer focused thing. They're usually after something's much more specific.
Yeah.
And they didn't, they rolled out that broad bundling policy, and it sounded like multi-units were toast, when they first rolled it out. And they've been extremely slow to enforce it.
Right.
So, you know.
I know this isn't a question, Stacy, but I wanted to bring this up because I saw an interesting post earlier today. I actually retweeted it. But Stacy, I love selling on Amazon and Walmart and do fairly well. Appreciate what you guys do this twice a week. I think you're saying I learned so much. First of all, thank you for the kind words. Learning something from us is got to be difficult. We're just a well, my son calls me a clanker now, so I whatever that means. But now I saw someone post on Twitter, and he said after focusing on Walmart for the past 3 years, selling on Amazon is easy mode. And I retweeted that because I thought that was kind of funny.
That is funny.
EB, any feedback on using QZ Tray for printing Amazon shipping labels? I uninstalled Print Connect. That solved the automatic label printing issue. I have never used that. So unfortunately, I don't have any feedback for you. I'm sorry. Oh, that's great, Jerry. I look forward to having you in there, man. You'll be a great addition to the crew, man.
Especially if you do the kind of FBM that you did last year. That'll be
I'm serious.
We'll be hitting you up on questions all over the place, Jerry.
Deal Hunter. My wife requested to return an Amazon item. They refunded and told her to keep it or discard of it. This made me think, will the Amazon seller get paid for it, even with the fact that it was refunded? It's probably going to depend. Depend on their settings. You know, I don't know if this was an arbitrage item, if this was a PL item, if it was a low cost item. There are some sellers, and there's an option that you can allow certain things to just be kept and refunded by the customer, where it may not make sense to accept a return. So I'll give you an example. I was listening to a podcast this morning on my hot girl walk, and Sean Purry, he did not come out with the name of the book. He was like, I got to gatekeep this book for a little bit. And I was like, okay, challenge accepted, sir. And I used Perplexity, and I put in exactly, what he talked about in the book and stuff like that. And I think I found it. After I did my own homework, I then went to the comment section and I saw 3 other people and they said the exact same thing. And I was like, okay. I'm feeling a little good about this. So the book was $4.99 for the paperback. We don't have a book budget in this house, so that was an instant buy. Well, if that book was sold by a third-party seller for $4.99, and I get it, and I decide, you know what, I found the PDF online, I want to return this book, it actually would not make sense for the third-party seller to accept that return. It would make sense for them to say, hey, you know what, I've got to abide by Amazon's return policy, which means they can return it, but just let them keep it, just refund them the money, because the refund administration fee alone would be more than I'm going to make on the actual book. And so that may be the case. If it was an $8 item that she purchased, she wants to return it. What was the refund administration? I just paid a $5 refund administration fee on an item that got returned. I think that's the max. It's whatever is, I don't know. It's a percentage or $5, whatever's greater. And this was a $200 item, so the return administration fee was $5. Not a whole lot of people know that that's in there, so chances are she actually bought it from a savvy seller. Now, if you don't have that set up and Amazon is just doing that out of the kindness of their heart, they should reimburse a portion of it, minus any selling fees and stuff like that. But if your settings are set up correctly, then no, they're not going to reimburse.
Are you really going to tell that story and then you yourself also gatekeep what book it is?
No, I would never. So the name of the book that I purchased is, and it is A Technique for Producing Ideas, a Simple 5-Step Formula, by the advertising executive James Webb Young. This was an essay or something that he wrote back in the 60s. And like, this book isn't even by him. Like, it's not an actual real book. But Sean Purry was like, this book has like changed the way that I come up with ideas. And I was like, oh, sold.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Maurice, someone that has a respectable business with the idea of an inch deep and a mile wide. Ideally, what does that look like? Number of ASINs, number of units, etc. This is a very nuanced, I think this requires a very nuanced answer and a very individualized answer. But if I recall, the easiest answer may come from Jeff Storch, who we've had on the podcast a couple of times. And I want to say that he said no more than 3% of his available capital tied up in any one ASIN. Am I recalling that correct?
See, I'm getting confused, but because I had it in my head, I thought you were going to say 5% in one brand.
Perhaps so that was. Maybe it was 5% in one brand. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've got a couple things kind of getting mixed together, but they're not far off collectively.
Yeah. So let's say, for example, that you had $100,000, just for ease of math, and you go by the rule of no more than 3% in any one particular ASIN. Well, I mean, that lets you have a fairly large business across a lot of ASINs, and also may allow you to go fairly deep on some ASINs. That's $3,000. If your sourcing cost is $9.99 and you're spending $3,000 on that one item, that's a lot of units. Whereas if your sourcing cost is maybe $100 and you're spending $3,000 on any one ASIN, it's going to be much less. So I almost think that the percentage is maybe more important than the number of ASINs or the number of units, because that allows you to be a bit more flexible as you grow and as your war chest gets larger.
Yeah, and there's you can do it informally too. I mean, a different way to frame this, from a less technical aspect of it, would essentially, you can talk about it in worst case scenario terms. Like if you look at what your catalog is, you look at what your inventory valuation is currently, you look at what you have inbound as far as the value goes, and basically if you're an inch deep and a mile wide, you can look at whatever you're thinking about purchasing and the units you're purchasing and kind of test it by asking yourself, if Amazon jumps on this at MSRP and I have to sell it for a small loss, or I basically can't count on these numbers that I think I'm going to profit, how bad does it hurt?
Mm-hmm.
Like tempering worst case scenario, kind of by default will also take you in that same direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm going to keep plugging podcast guests that we've had, because we've got, honestly, our back catalog of podcast episodes, in my opinion, I mean, it's a PhD in not only selling on Amazon, but, business management and stuff like that. But you go back to some of our conversations with Dylan, and he talks about, playing an infinite game. And by doing this, by going that inch deep, mile wide, by, choosing a percentage, for each ASIN or each brand, etc. Just to Chris's point, you're making sure that nothing, no policy change, no brand gating, etc., puts you out of business and allows you to play an infinite game.
Yeah, I've said that so many times. Like, make sure that worst case scenario is survivable.
Yeah.
You want it in a tidy little slogan.
I got to give Jerry a little shout out here. 2,500 ASINs, 28% out of stock right now. That still is a lot of ASINs, man.
Yeah, dude's a beast.
Dude's an animal.
And if he's out in Seattle, I wonder if we have a podcast guest round those parts coming out soon, right?
Yes, we certainly do. Deal Hunter, do you need an Amazon business account if you do A2A? Or will a regular non-prime work? Can I use tax exempt for the business account? So it is not a requirement that you have an Amazon business account to do A2A. You can do it from a regular non-prime account. Absolutely. You can use your tax exempt on both the Amazon business account and the regular non-prime account. You can do that both ways. My suggestion and Saul's suggestion, the king of Amazon flips, would be to have a regular non-prime account and an Amazon business account. Have both of them. Have tax exempt on both of them. And then if you go source, look at the prices on both of them, because sometimes you can get bulk discounts on an Amazon business account, and sometimes there will be different prices. However, it does seem that Amazon business accounts get closed up quicker than personal accounts. If you get too high in the number of returns, things like that. Deborah, you're going to talk about the fourth quarter group and being part of OAC Plus. I guess I need to know your question there. They are two separate things because we don't offer 200 leads per week in OAC Plus. So I have put a discount out there. I don't really sell it very hard. We are having a webinar tomorrow about the Q4 group. But if you have a question, just shoot me a DM. Be happy to answer or help you in any way I can. This Automate. I shipped an FBA box and have all the receipts. UPS labeled a FBA center, item receipts, etc. Amazon said they received the empty box. I opened a claim but got rejected. Any thoughts on how to deal with this? Yeah. Give them more information and continue to feed them more information until they relent. That's all you got to do. And that's simplifying it, but you just need to be relentless about this. If you've got the information, give it to them and don't take no for an answer.
Again, persistence is rarely not the right answer.
Mm-hmm. Deal Hunter, inventory management question. If you buy products at $15 each, a week later you buy the same products at $20 each, do you average the purchase price in the spreadsheet or create two different SKUs? Personally, I'm going to average the purchase price. I'm not going to average it. I'm going to make two separate entries. I'm not going to go back and edit, and say, oh, well, this, etc. But when you're doing your numbers, you're going to average those numbers out. I do know some people who will create two different SKUs. And that's the way that they want to do it. I'm not sure that there is a wrong or a right answer here, personally. It's going to be whatever is best for you.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I don't think there's a wrong answer either way. But the way I would divide it out would be if they're two different discount codes, but the regular retail price is the same, I'm going to use the same SKU, right? Mm-hmm. Because I know, codes and whatnot can change. Sometimes you might get a nice welcome code that's a one-time use. you get 15% off your first time, but then there's usually a 10% code out there, but if the product is the same price both times, like I'm not interested in opening up a new SKU until the supplier changes their price. So if I buy, if the $15 to $20 is simply a change on the supplier side, then I would use a different SKU. Because I feel like there might be a point where that matters as far as like the long-term viability of that product, as a replenishable item, because there's simple thing, like if a retailer just raises the price on something, like my coffee goes from 14 and change to 17 and change just overnight, I think you need to have two different sets of numbers. Not that I'm going to stop buying coffee, but but if I was sourcing that, I think it would identify scenarios where it works at this price, it doesn't work at this price if they had different SKUs, if you were getting that granular with it.
Yeah. Speaking of coffee, I did read that the price of coffee is outpacing inflation. I think the price of coffee is up like 4 or 4.5% year over year.
Those are real numbers. I was paying 14. Now I'm paying 17.
That's crazy.
My coffee's outpacing my patience.
Let's see here. Tony, Big T. Last week we talked about cashback extensions and their fine print. That fine print is very short and tells you valuable stuff like Stanley considers a bulk order to be 20 units or more. That's interesting. Yeah, a good catch on that. Yeah, it's not always a bad idea to look at that kind of stuff. I wish that I could be bothered to do it more often. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions. I know that there was one person who asked if we could answer your question, and I unfortunately didn't see that one pop in there. But you're always welcome back. We're always happy to take your question. Before we go, I believe this is one of my son's friends. So thanks for tuning in, and sorry we bored the heck out of you.
If she's still here, kudos to you, ma'am.
Right. All right. One more here. Does the inventory lab included in Seller 365, is it a full inventory management software, and does it work on Walmart? It is a full inventory management software as far as, that goes. Yes. However, I do not believe that Walmart is included currently. So, but yeah,
I don't think so.
Yep. All right. Well, guys, we'll wrap it up there for this week. A good 90-minute show this Sunday. Of course, we're going to be back this coming Wednesday at 5:30. We'll do this all over again, bring you guys some news, answer your questions. And until then, I hope you guys have a great week. I hope something good happens to you. So, all right, that's the show, everybody.